Hello, my wonderful students. Welcome to your final class lecture, Module 7. In this course, we've looked at education through the lenses of a functionalist and the Marxist points of view. Last week, we looked at how interpretivists look at education as a shared social structure, an interpretation of meanings through negotiation between members of a classroom, and how they interpret the rules of the game. So this week, we're going to look at the interpretivist view through Weber's rationalization theory and apply it to the McDonaldization of modern public education. Max Weber's rationalization theory in general looks at how the modern world was becoming governed by rules and bureaucratic regulations. Rationalization drives out values, emotions, and sympathy for efficiency and calculability. The move from traditional social practices and values as motivators for social organization towards rationality permits the current bureaucratic state to run. Weber's abstract idea of the iron cage traps individuals in systems based purely on efficiency, rational calculation, and control, but to an irrational extent. People's emotions, values, and ethical ideals are cast aside for efficiency and calculable results. For the last 150 years or so, organizational structure of schools has remained relatively unchanged. Students are grouped together in age-based classrooms and progress together to the next grade. To advance American competitiveness in global marketplace and close the achievement gap between poor and minority students and their more advantaged peers, the U.S. government increased its control of education with No Child Left Behind Act, and more recently with the Every Student Succeeds Act to hold schools more accountable for student outcomes. However, this reduced the variability of teaching methods. Teachers found they needed to teach to the test in order for students to get the needed scores on the standardized assessments. And students lost out on important supplemental education in arts, science, and sports. So what does rationalized education do? Instead of cultivating a deep, holistic love of learning, education has been reduced to an assembly line where you get the educational parts you need in one grade before moving on to the next set of educational parts in the next grade, and along the way rejecting those who do not conform, and all designed to create docile and predictable workers. George Reitzer analyzed Weber's work on rationalization and applied those concepts to modern society and the fast food restaurant, mainly McDonald's. Reitzer believed the fast food principles of efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control might better explain current trends in rationalization. He pointed out that overly rationalized systems create irrational situations by strict adherence to institutional rules and thus denies human reasoning. Our current public education system resembles McDonald's in its design to be efficient, predictable, calculable, and controlled. Efficiency, the optimal method for accomplishing a task. By focusing on efficiency, the onus of learning is placed on the teacher rather than the learner. Hence, the learner becomes passive and unable to process content on a deeper level. Calculability, learning objectives that are quantifiable rather than subjective. Quantifying learning objectives helps teachers to measure a learner's knowledge attainment and skills acquired. However, the learner's test scores and grades are fundamentally decontextualized to him or her. Predictability, standardized and uniform services that are highly repetitive, highly routine, and predictable. By focusing on predictability, the onus for learning again is placed on the teacher rather than the learner. Hence, teachers use routines to design learning environments and tasks that elicit predetermined responses. As a result, critical and creative thinking tends to be suppressed within the learning environment. Control, standardized and uniform practices that establish routines. By focusing on control, the learner's needs, preferences, and interests are not considered, while the teacher is crafting his or her standardized practices. Hence, the learner becomes an entity that needs to be controlled rather than taught. McDonaldization then attempts to wipe out any of the messiness or inefficiencies of learning. Rationalization and McDonaldization is making itself known in higher education as well. Specialized instructors with expertise in only one or two topics may teach part-time, and tenured professors are going by the wayside. The bachelor's degree requirements are slowly being lowered to fewer credits. General education requirements are being streamlined. A reduction of course options leaves the customization out of your education, and quantifiable assignments are replacing subjective ones for easier grading, thus allowing for more students to enroll in a course without overloading the instructor. Some reform models for K-12 education include making school classrooms multi-age, which more resemble society as a whole, such as families, churches, and workplaces, where students can learn to socialize and work with those who are different than themselves. Another model gives more autonomy to teachers to teach from a creative perspective. So where McDonaldization may be effective in making good burgers, does it do a good enough job to educate our children?